Hey guys, welcome to Matt's Movies, Music, and More. Today we're talking about Leprechaun 2, released in 1994. Leprechaun 2 was released a year after the first one and follows the leprechaun as he kidnaps a girl named Bridget who he wishes to make his bride. And all along the way, Bridget's boyfriend Cody is attempting to save her before it is too late. Okay, so Leprechaun 2. Before we get into it, I just gotta say, and I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion in the horror world or not, but I much prefer this film to the original film. I think that with this film and the next film in the franchise, they get it just right for what this franchise is and should be. They get the perfect mix of dark humor and the slasher element in there without going too far into the humor. And when you're watching the movie, you can feel that balance, and it's really good when you can get that perfect balance between the comedy and the horror, and it's not just so one side to the other that it's too ridiculous that you just can't watch it. Like some of the other entries in this franchise eventually do get to, mostly past 3. Getting into some of the specifics I like I mentioned in the last review, definitely Warwick Davis as the Leprechaun. And I think he is better utilized even in this movie than he even was the first one. And he was one of my biggest positives of the first one. And he, I think, is the shining star in this film. The blend of comedy and horror that he can bring to the movie with his character really does make this an enjoyable watch. The second thing I really liked about this film was the bigger setting. This movie is set in Hollywood, California, so it does feel bigger, it does feel brighter, it feels like there's a lot more going on. With that being one of my biggest complaints about the first one is that the settings were really dull and boring to me. I do think that Hollywood is a nice change of pace, but unfortunately I don't think they go far enough with it as they would in a movie like Leprechaun 3 with the Vegas setting, where you actually see the leprechaun walking around big bright sets and more elaborate sets. They go for that a little more here, but they don't go the whole way there like I do think they do eventually do in the third one, but I do still think this is more interesting to watch than the setting we got in the first film. Another thing I really liked in this film was the kills that we got. Now, they weren't overly gory kills, it wasn't blood, guts, and gore type of kills, but I do think the kills that we did get in this film were more creative than the first one. There are 2 that definitely stick out in my mind, those being when we see Morty get killed and the pot of gold gets cut out of his stomach and pulled out, which I thought was a very creative way because we see the leprechaun trapped in the safe and Morty has to wish him out of the safe to get that pot of gold out of him, and when it does come out of him, it gets cut open and kills him, which I thought was a very creative way for that scene to play out. And the other one is in the garage when the leprechaun makes the guy believe that it's Bridget who's trying to seduce him in the garage, and you see these 2 blades and his face goes into it. You don't see it, it is off screen, but the effect of it I think is still very good. And now for some things I disliked about the film. The first thing being that I think the 2 main characters that we follow are nowhere near as good as even some of the characters we got in the first film. This sticks out with Bridget especially. I think the whole time her performance when she's acting scared, when she's running, near the third act of the film, the last 10 minutes or so, I think she's just completely awful. And I think the same thing with Cody. I think his performance throughout the film is also very flat, very uninspired. They are not even half as good as what Jennifer Aniston brought in the first film. The last 2 problems I have are basically continuity problems. The first being is at the beginning of the film, we see that the leprechaun is 1,000 years old, even though in the first film he said he's 600 years old. So I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to be putting these films together where each of them fall in the timeline, because that would mean that the first film and this film are 400 years apart, which if you think about it makes no sense. And that is not just a problem with this movie, it is a problem with the movies going on forward in this franchise. With continuity being in mind, we also begin to run into a problem that will be a franchise problem, and it all begins with this movie. And it really bugged me as I did go through this franchise. And that is, how are you supposed to kill the leprechaun? In every single film in this franchise, they say, this is the only way to kill him. This is the only way to kill him. In the first film, we saw that it had to be a four-leaf clover. That was the only way to kill him. Yet in this film, it has to be an iron rod. And I'm not saying that all horror franchises don't do this, especially films like Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play. They all kind of bend the rules about how you're supposed to kill the main villain. But in this franchise, it definitely sticks out because of all the continuity errors. There's no continuity to any of these films at all. I just choose to believe that he got free somehow and ended up in the place that he is now. Because if you try to think about it, none of these movies will connect. And that is definitely a shame when you're trying to binge watch a franchise, especially for someone like me who likes to see a long, drawn-out story throughout a couple movies of how each story is going to be connected. It kind of just feels like you're watching a jumbled mess that isn't truly tied together in any way. It's just something that a bunch of different people made up and just threw together. Although, with all that being said, I do believe Leprechaun 2 is definitely a step up from the first one, and I'm very excited to go back and watch the third one and the fourth one and see, is this my favorite in the franchise, or maybe do I like one of them other sequels better? It's going to be very interesting to watch over the next couple days. So if you enjoyed the first one, I would suggest continuing on with this one. I do think you're going to have a lot of fun with it. And overall, I would rate this film a 3 out of 5. I just wanted to thank you guys for watching. If you wouldn't mind subscribing or even leaving a like, it would really help me out. I'm just trying to get this channel going and getting it off the ground very slowly, but we are trying to get it going. So if you wouldn't mind leaving a subscribe and a like, and tell me what you think of Leprechaun 2 down in the comments. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.